This episode is brought to you by ProMensal.
When I learnt the limitations of self-control, it completely changed my life because I realised that I wasn't actually a failure and I wasn't doing all these things wrong. I was just trying to depend on a resource that's fleeting.
Welcome to Thriving in Menopause, brought to you by Prevention Magazine. My name is Andrea Duval and I'm the editor of Prevention. Does anyone else struggle with breaking bad habits and setting up healthy new ones? Particularly during menopause, maybe you're finding that some of your old ways no longer work for you, but breaking those patterns is tough. So today I'm talking with Dr. Gina Cleo, one of the world's leading experts in habits. She's done a lot of research, particularly around weight loss and why it's so hard to make weight loss last and make better eating habits stick. Welcome, Gina.
Hello, Andrea. Thanks so much for having me.
So let's talk about willpower. Do you need willpower to break habits and start new ones?
Our habits don't require willpower because they are automatic. So our habits sit in this automated part of our brain that just happens subconsciously. So that's the real beauty of creating healthy habits. But when we're trying to change those habits, initially we do need some willpower, absolutely. But we don't need it for too long because when that habit is changed, then that becomes the new normal for us and it becomes that second nature. So initially, yes, we do need willpower, but it's really good to remember the less you do something, the less habitual it will become. And willpower is only required at the beginning stages of changing a habit.
So how do we set up, at the start of the year, we go, I'm going to do this and this and I'm going to make it last. So is there a particular pattern we should follow?
To start a new habit, sometimes we need to break an old habit, but not always. Sometimes we can just add a new habit into our life. And it's interesting that you bring up the start of the year because we know that roughly 95% of New Year's resolutions are generally forgotten by the time it's February. So when we're very good at creating goals, we're not that great at sustaining those goals long term. So you asked about the formula. Well, a habit requires 3 key ingredients, and that is a trigger, it's the habit itself, and then there's a reward. And that trigger is the thing that cues or triggers the habit itself. So for example, putting on your seatbelt is a habit that's triggered by sitting in the car. And the reward that you might get from that is that you're following the law and you know you'll be safer for it. So one thing to always remember is when you're trying to create a new habit, it's think, what can trigger me? What time of day will I do it? Or what place will I be in?
So when we talk about our environment, there are some things that we just can't change about the environment. And I think a lot of women listening to this might relate to that. Dinner's done, you've washed up, you're sitting on the couch. This is your treat time, your reward for finishing the day. So it's common practice to either reach for a chocolate, maybe another glass of wine. We can't change the fact that we're sitting on the couch. So breaking that mental link is really hard.
It is. It's really hard. But, the changing our environment only needs to be very subtle. So I've worked with clients who I've asked them to sit on a different spot of the couch. And it sounds so simple and almost silly, but it's amazing how it works because your brain thinks, okay, I'm not that familiar in this part of the room. And so you start to become more mindful instead of just being on autopilot because one habit generally triggers off another. So our habits work in like a cascade, a domino effect. So you might wake up in the morning, you have the same routine, you get dressed in the same way, you dry yourself after a shower in the same way. And it's the same scenario with sitting on the couch. You sit on the couch in the same spot, you grab a similar snack and the cycle continues. But when you change that even slightly, so sitting on a different part of the couch or watching a different TV channel, your brain starts to think, oh, I don't recognize this pattern. And therefore the cascade of habit events after that doesn't get activated. So you can actually start to make a mindful decision.
So interesting. And when you say there's always a reward, I mean, let's face it, eating nice things or drinking wine feels good. Is that the reward?
Yeah, the reward can be anything. For some people, it's it's like, I get to relax. This is me time. For other people, it's the sweet tooth or wanting just to really wind down. And so our rewards are going to be different for every person. I think it's really important to be in touch and understand our rewards though, because that's another great way to break habits. So say in the evening, you're on the couch and you've grabbed a couple of cookies, and for you, that's your me time. So you can think, okay, I'm obviously wanting me time. How else can I achieve that? But do it in a more productive or healthier way. And so that can be stretching for 10 minutes, making a herbal tea, running a bath, listening to soft music, whatever it might be, to give yourself that same reward that your body is seeking.
And that's also taking you out of that same spot on the couch.
Exactly.
Okay. So one of the things that I've heard often is that it takes a particular amount of time to break a bad habit.
Yeah, there's a really common myth that it takes 21 days to break a habit. And Andrea, if that was true, we would all have the healthiest, best lives and we wouldn't have any concerning habits, because 3 weeks is not that long a time to commit to something. But reality is the amount of time it takes to change a habit really depends on several things. Firstly, how habitual you are as a person. So some of us are more habitual than others. And so if you're a more habitual person, it might take you a little bit longer to change a habit because you're very set in your routine compared to someone who's a bit more spontaneous. The other thing is how complex the habit is that you're trying to change. If you're trying to change a very complex habit, so say it's, doing push-ups, for example, you're wanting to create a habit of doing push-ups compared with a habit of drinking a glass of water, which is a much simpler behavior. Drinking that glass of water is not going to take anywhere near as long as mastering the art of push-ups, because push-ups are much more complex than drinking that glass of water. Also, how frequently you do that habit will dictate how long it takes you to change it. So the more you do something, the more habitual it gets, and the less you do it, the less habitual it gets. So the first few days, they're always the hardest. The first step is the hardest. And it's thinking to yourself, it's okay for me to feel a little bit strange if I don't do it. But you know what? That feeling's not going to last very long. The less I do this habit, the less automatic it's going to feel. And then with time, not doing that habit, that's going to be your new normal. So just hold on to that thought.
We'll be right back after this. Okay, we're back. Sounds good. You know, we were talking earlier about the New Year's resolution, which is, this is going to be my healthiest year ever. One of the traps I think we can fall into is not then defining what that actually means. Is that something that you talk to your clients about, defining very specifically new habits?
Absolutely. I think it's so important to also not just define our habits, although that's very important, but to be in touch with why it is that we want to change it. Are we doing it for someone else or for ourselves? Does it align with our values? Because there are several things that influence why we do the things we do. And unless all those things really align, it becomes really hard to change behavior. And so I think the first question to ask ourselves is, why is it that I want to achieve that? Why is that important for me? Really check in with your values and then go from there.
Okay. What are the most successful ways of framing something in your mind to make it work?
It really comes back again to, does this align with my values? Is it intrinsically motivated? So intrinsically motivated means I want to do this for myself because I genuinely believe that this is going to be good for me and my life. Extrinsically motivated, on the other hand, it's doing things for external reasons. It might be to gain recognition or financial reward or avoid punishment, for example. What we find in research is that extrinsically motivated behavior only lasts a short period of time. We'll only do something for someone else a short period of time. My partner will only put washing in the basket, not outside the basket, until I nag him to do it again because he doesn't see as much value in that as I do. And so I think really touching base into your value system, making sure that what you want to achieve is truly for you and that you're not doing it for other people or other things.
Tina, I know that you first came to this particular area that you're now such an amazing expert in through being a dietitian, and we're interested in why it was that so many women lost weight but then put it back on again. So
That's right.
What are the insights you've taken from that?
That's exactly right. I was a dietitian and, I loved my job. I loved being able to help people achieve goals, but I found that they would come back weeks or months later and wanting to achieve the same things we'd worked so hard to already achieve. And so that's why I did a PhD in habits, and I really dedicated my life to it, because research shows that habit change is the only proven method to sustainable change.
When it comes to habits, we tend to judge ourselves very harshly. I'm so bad. I've got such bad willpower, no self-control. I didn't get up and do an hour of yoga before going to work this morning. I did eat 3 chocolate biscuits with my morning tea. I'm so bad. The level of guilt we carry around this self-control, it's quite out of control.
I couldn't agree with you more, Andrea. And when I learned limitations of self-control, it completely changed my life, because I realized that I wasn't actually a failure and I wasn't doing all these things wrong. I was just trying to depend on a resource that's fleeting. So self-control is a fleeting resource. We only have so much of it. And in our day, the things that deplete our self-control are things like sleeplessness, fatigue, feeling hungry, making decisions, feeling uncomfortable or undesirable emotions like stress, anxiety, depression. There are so many things that deplete our self-control. So
you're speaking to every woman in perimenopause going tick, tick, tick at this point.
Not to mention hormones, the hot flushes you've had that have kept you up at night. So many things. So no wonder we during the day, as we're depleting our self-control, no wonder after a long, hard, emotional day, the last thing we want to come home to is chicken salad. We want pizza, that extra glass of wine. We want those chocolate biscuits, because those things help us to feel good. They increase our dopamine. And so they essentially replenish some of our self-control. But some healthier ways to replenish self-control is things like rest, sleep, eating a balanced diet, being out in nature, and feeling positive emotions, things like joy and happiness and love. And, they're not always available at any time. So it's really just about realizing our self-control is limited. And when you are having a stressful period in your life, just to lower your expectations of yourself. It's okay to not get it all done. Tomorrow's a new day. Next week's a new week. And you just do as much as you can in the day that you have.
I think that that's where having very specific goals and not expecting it all at once can be really useful. Today, I'm going to make one healthy meal. Today, I vow the next 3 days I'm going to take my lunch to work. Just 3 days and build. Do you find that works for your clients?
Oh, absolutely. Our brains are only capable of changing up to 3 things at once. And research shows that actually, if you just focus on one small thing, you are much more likely to achieve that thing compared with trying to change many things or change big things. And this is one of the main reasons that New Year's resolutions don't end up working. It's because we often try to overhaul our lives. We want to eat better and lose weight and save more and be better parents. And there's just so much we want to fit in. But really, doing those small, achievable things is not only much easier to initiate, it's much easier to sustain. And it's all about consistency. So if we sustain something over periods of time, then that's really going to be our new life and our new identity.
I guess you must be a walking, talking example. You radiate good health. Doing the research you're doing, what light bulb moments have there been for you?
Thank you for the compliments. It's funny because I don't see my life like that. I think for me, I'm aware that the behaviors that I do can become habitual. And so I'm much more conscious of my repeated behaviors. My biggest light bulb moment, I would say, I used to have a bad habit of or I'd say an unwanted habit. I won't dichotomize habits as good or bad, but I had an unwanted habit. Whenever I'd get petrol, I would grab a snack, and it was often like a Snickers bar or something like that. There's a dietitian confession there for you. And my aha moment is when I realized how the brain works, and that every time I grabbed a Snickers bar when I went to the petrol station, I wasn't just doing it for that moment. I was actually reinforcing this habit, because every time you do a habit, you're reinforcing it. You're making it stronger and stronger. That means when I finally came to wanting to break that habit, I was actually making it harder for myself. So my aha moment was, Gina, don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait till Monday, because by then you're going to make it even harder for yourself. So start now. Do it today. Every time you choose not to do your unwanted habit, you're making it easier for yourself to not do it again. So my aha moment then boiled down to everything we do matters. Every decision we make is either moving us towards or away from our goals. And it's really our decision what way we want to go. And some of the tricks to that, or the keys to that, is one of them we've touched on, which is making small changes. And it's actually believing in our own ability to achieve something. Self-efficacy is another fancy word for saying self-belief. And it's the belief in our abilities to do something. And we see in science that self-efficacy is the number one predictor of success. If you believe you can do something, you will do it. If you are a bit, I'm not really sure if I can, but I'll give it a go anyway, you may not achieve it. And again, that's why doing those small changes are so important, because small changes are much easier to achieve. So you're more likely to believe that you can do it.
It's funny because I think at this point again in life where we're so stretched and fatigued, we probably need some tips on how to pump up our own tires.
I think comes back to being objective about our skills and creating achievable goals. You know, if you think of what you've achieved, all the things that you've done in life, and not to downplay those things, because they're amazing and they're important and they're meaningful. And I think sometimes it takes someone else to tell us some of our great characteristics. And that's okay to ask a friend or a partner or your kids, maybe not your kids, maybe a parent. And having that self-belief really comes down to, I may have not achieved it before, even though I've tried, but perhaps the goalpost was too big. And these expectations that I had on myself were too big. Maybe that was the problem, not the fact that I don't have the skills to achieve that. So it's really being objective and realistic about the goalposts and the goals.
So that's interesting, Gina. What you're saying there is going to resonate for those of us who do try hard to, I'm going to go to yoga every single day. And you come to Thursday and you've been once. And how do we get back on the horse?
Well, I think what you said there is every single day. Again, an expectation like that, it's really hard, because if you don't already have the habit of going to yoga several times a week, then the expectation to go every day, it's a big stretch. So starting small, and I call them micro habits. So the idea is, think about the ultimate goal. Say yoga every day is the ultimate goal. And then you want to break that down into a micro habit. What is the smallest sustainable step that you can take in the week that will help you move towards that ultimate goal? And that might be yoga once a week. And you do that until that feels like second nature. And that might be several weeks of you just doing once a week. And once that feels natural, add on another day, and then add on another day. I had a client once who had never exercised. He wanted to run a 10-kilometer race. And for the first month, all he did was put on his sneakers. That's all he did. Put on his sneakers. He never exercised. And that was his micro habit. Once that became a familiar habit for him, then he walked out to his letterbox. And then after that, he walked down the road and then round the block. And eventually he ran the 10-kilometer run. But that started with a really baby step.
That's really inspiring. We'll be right back after this. Okay, we're back. Can we talk about habit stacking?
Yes. So you may have heard the term before, it's habit stacking. And before I was talking about a habit always being triggered. So the idea of stacking is that you attach the new habit that you want to create with something that's already in your life. So say, for example, you need to remember to take medications in the morning. You might put those medications next to your coffee maker because you know you're going to go there in the morning. And so you're essentially stacking a new habit with something that's already in your life. And that's habit stacking.
That also chimes for the fellow that had got the habit of putting on his walking shoes and then he walked out to the letterbox. It's building up.
Exactly.
Okay, so just in closing then, I'd be interested in some of the key take-home messages from your research that we may not have touched on now that you'd like to share.
I think it's important to remember that creating habits is a process of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think when we start a new journey of, changing behaviors, we can get really disheartened when we fall off the wagon. And I've been there. I think most of us have been in that place where whether it be yo-yo dieting or not going to the yoga class we said we'd go to or eating the biscuits even though we said we wouldn't do it. But I think the take home here is that's completely normal. You've been living a certain way for a period of time, and to expect that to change overnight is unreasonable. So if you think success is not a linear process and there's ups and downs in the whole journey, and that's part of the journey, Brené Brown says that it's not a matter of if we fall, it's a matter of when we fall. And so the idea is really just to plan for those moments when we do fall and getting up on the horse quickly rather than being disheartened and falling off altogether and not getting back up at all and thinking, I can't do this. You can do this. Just get back. Don't wait for tomorrow. Just do it now.
Thank you so much, Gina. You've given us plenty to chew on. And thank you, listeners, for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. Meanwhile, for more great information about living your healthiest life, don't forget to pick up a copy of Prevention Magazine. I'm Andrea Duval, and I'll see you next time.